Houston's beloved regional park, AstroWorld, closed officially on October 30th, 2005. It's now been more than 20 years, and this park has had a fascinating kind of history of investments. It started off as a beautiful regional park, one of the honestly best in North America, and then got a really interesting collection of limit-pushing additions to their park over the years, and eventually kind of died a painful death, really.
It's so sad. AstroWorld has had an unbelievable history of attractions, and some are more famous and more successful than others. And these episodes is like a big testament to that, because there's some stuff that is just going to be lost to history if we don't talk about. I think one of the more interesting things in the grand scheme of AstroWorld attractions is that despite having a full water park that opened in 1983. Waterworld, they also jumped on the very popular trend of building water parks as dry attractions in the regular amusement park. Which is funny, because a lot of parks were building water slides as dry attractions, as regular attractions that you could take your shoes and your shorts and ride. Parks were doing this because water slides were gaining traction, but a lot of parks were reluctant to dive into doing a full water park expansion. They were sort of, no pun intended, they were testing the waters with water slide attractions in their dry park. AstroWorld did it backward. They already had a full water park included with their admission, but Houston loves water rides, they love water slides, Houston loves to get wet. So in 1992, AstroWorld built the Adventure Rivers of Texas, which was a 4-slide water slide tower plunked right in the middle of the dry park, right next to the Coney Island Cyclone, the Coney Island, Texas Cyclone. So you had your Texas Cyclone and the Texas Adventure Rivers, and this was based on the Adventure Rivers attraction that opened in 1991. It's Six Flags Great Adventure, but just the largest of their myriad of water slide towers that Great Adventure was afforded. A big yellow twisting water slide complex that ran from 1992 until 98 or 99-ish. But I'll always be tickled that, like, AstroWorld is just a water ride attraction forever and ever. Their roots are water rides, and that even included building water slides in their dry park, even though they had a complete dedicated water slide park as part of the attraction.
So if you haven't put 2 and 2 together yet, you are now listening to part 2 of our AstroWorld episode. So enjoy the rest of the history of AstroWorld, and this time we promise we're going to dive into some of the reasons why the park closed, and some of the challenges that the park faced in its later years.
And a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sean.
This is Alex.
And this is Ian.
And you're listening to another episode of Coaster Kings Radio.
And so speaking of the ride rotation program, the next 80s edition was part of that ride rotation program, was the Looping Starship in 1986. This had originally opened at Six Flags Over Georgia for a single year in 1985. It's worth noting that Six Flags Over Georgia would actually receive another Looping Starship in 1989 when Six Flags acquired a lot of the rides from Vancouver's Expo 86, which includes this famous Aero Vekoma Zombie Child Scream Machine, which is now at Six Flags St. Louis as Ninja. And originally they thought, we're AstroWorld astronauts. This is great. We're going to name the ride after this new Challenger space shuttle for AstroWorld. There are reasons why they didn't choose to do that, and instead they went with the name Looping Starship. And so it operated at AstroWorld. How long did it operate, I think, at AstroWorld?
It was there for quite some. It was there until it closed.
For a while.
It ran until 2005.
It was there until 2005.
And then Six Flags Over Texas got it, and it had a really great reskin.
I love that reskin.
One of those red comic-looking rockets from Wile E. Coyote. So it was the Acme Rocking Rocket at Six Flags Over Texas for a few years, and then they ultimately scrapped it for maintenance issues. That of all of the rides that AstroWorld sent to other parks, that one surprised me as one that actually reopened. Like,
yeah,
there
me
were
too.
rides that I feel like were a safer and easier bet to repurpose than that one. And It
Absolutely.
actually, because it had already been taken apart twice, and somehow it had a third lease on life. It operated a third Six Flags park for almost 10 years, I think, before they called it quits
2005 to 2014. Yeah, that's a long time. And
for
the
whatever
reskin on
reason,
that
Six
was
Flags
great.
over Texas was like one of the only Six Flags legacy parks to not get the Intamin looping starships rides. Magic Mountain had one. Obviously, Six Flags over Georgia had two. Great Adventure had one. Great America added one. It replaced the Edge after they decided that the Edge was not an appropriate attraction for their park. They put one in where the free fall was, and it was called Power Dive, and it had that rocket ship aesthetic theme to it. And then, of course, the Paramount parks all added one of this ride, but with the pirate ship theme. And we still had one in the United States up until last year at King's Dominion.
With the Berserker. I know.
With the closure of the Berserker, the United States is now completely lacking in Intamin looping starships, which is a shame, because at one point we had like a dozen in North America. They were so many everywhere. Because Canada was big on them too. Expo 86 had one, West Edmonton Mall had one, and Canada's Wonderland had one. It was like required reading. They were everywhere. Everybody loved them. They were big in Europe too. But I think the biggest place for them was Japan, because not only did Japan build like 4 of them, but most of them are still open. They're still quite. In fact, they were so popular. I mean, you could find there were 2 Intamin looping starships in Tokyo alone. At Tokyo Summerland and Tokyo Yomiuri Land. Yomiuri Land still has theirs. You can also still ride one at Nagashima Spa Land in the exact specs and design.
Oh gosh, they do
Starship
still have
logo
and
everything. It looks exactly the way the Six Flags looping starship ones looked in their heyday. The signs and everything, totally painstakingly maintained. And it's so funny, when we rode the one at Yomiuri Land, I had this distinct flashback to Flashback at Magic Mountain, because sitting in those seats and with the big ugly harness and like the wall, their visuals were not a big priority on these Intamin rides. The Intamin Space Diver Z-Force, aka Flashback, which was also developed for Six Flags and being passed around various Six Flags parks at the same time as the Zooping Starship rides, had a very similar feel of sitting and getting your abdomen crushed by this horrible, like, C-shaped hydraulic shoulder harness, and then looking directly in front of you, which is just a wall that was like at eye level. Yep. And I'm like, oh my God, this is exactly how Z-Force felt. It was the same. It was the same feeling.
So strange. and the fact that it's like a ratcheting like shoulder harness, but it's just a bench. It's like it's not like a molded seat or anything. It's just like a little just a flat bench you're sitting on. Nothing, no bucket seats, no nothing. So to keep us on track with our timeline, in 1988, they opened the Tidal Wave, which holds the distinction of being the first modern shoot-the-chutes type ride. It was developed by Aero, and it was originally built for the 1984 World's Fair in New Orleans. It's worth noting that probably the more famous example of Aero doing this would be the Tidal Wave at Busch Gardens, but this was built on the spot where their like riverboat ride was under Accelerate. So at least part of the plot was used for that. But unlike the one at Busch Gardens, they didn't like retrofit the entire like course of the river into it. This was just an oval shape that was built though in that nice spot where that riverboat ride was.
Yeah, they had already taken a lot of the plot area and dropped Accelerate on top of it.
Yes.
I think they just didn't feel like it was necessary to like weave the boat ride around under the I mean, it would have been cool, but I guess it was just...
I think it would have been cool, but it
was cost inefficient for a ride that was already manufactured and complete, so like, I get it.
Yeah.
The World's Fair in St. Louis was just like Expo 86. It was just a shopping spree for Six Flags. They also got the Ferris wheel from the 1984 World's Fair and assembled it at Six Flags St. Louis. It came Colossus.
Well, and I also, famously, the 1984 World's Fair in New Orleans, people talk about the Aero history. That was the end of Aero Hus. That is when they really like overextended themselves because they put a stake into that World's Fair. Anyways,
there were so many Hus rides. That was where the Hus Condor debuted at the 1984 World's Fair. Six Flags would purchase several Condors. I don't know if they acquired the one from the World's Fair, but it wouldn't surprise me if that was
Won't
one
be
of them.
surprised.
We'll be talking about the condors in a little bit, actually. But yeah, so first, so Tidal Wave, Tidal Wave was cool. It didn't look like any of the other shoot-the-shoots. It was the only time that Aerodynamics did like the standard like paperclip shaped shoot-the-shoot type ride. Intamin and Hopkins, respectively, would pepper the known universe with these types of rides, these very basic ride systems. The Intamin ones famously had like the little dip in them. You can still enjoy them at places like Kings Island and Great America and Santa Clara. A lot of the Six Flags ones were Intamin, but they also did a lot of the Hopkins ones, which just had a straight drop. The Six Flags Great America, Six Flags St. Louis, Six Flags over Georgia all had the straight drop Hopkins flume rides. Magic Mountain had an Intamin Tidal Wave, but this one, it was taller than the other ones, and it was kind of like narrower, and it had a little additional lift hill bit before the drop as like a block section. Like this was a really high capacity version of this ride relative to the dedicated park model versions of the rides that would be built at around this time or later. I remember reading an article in Roller Coaster Magazine ages ago about King's Dominion, who got the Intamin prototype of their shoot-the-shoot, and they said it was an absolute nightmare to assemble and introduce that ride because it was part of the Lake Charles lake that was in the park. So like that was the first and last time for the Intamin rides. They're like, we are never going to attach this ride to an existing body of water. It will forever be built with a dedicated lagoon that is just for this ride because it is a huge pain in the ass.
I read that same article. It's just fascinating.
It's classic. Yeah. What was it? Diamond Falls, I think was
Diamond
what it was.
Falls. Yeah. It had a little diamond like crystal mine at the end of it. And it's,
it was cute. The turnaround had like a little, that was neat. This is the 90s the 80s were so interesting, not particularly for roller coasters, but for stuff like this was very interesting. Anyway, so after Tidal Wave, this is when AstroWorld, I think things started to turn a little bit for AstroWorld in terms of like favoritism.
Yeah, I agree.
Like you guys mentioned, the Bowie's era capping off the great acquisition of the Six Flags chain into the 7 parks. The 7 legacy Six Flags parks.
Yes.
The chain, once they had Six Flags, Great America and Chicago, that was the team all the way up until Time Warner era acquisition of Fiesta Texas. So up until for over 10 years, these were the 7 parks. And I think having such star children in the acquisition lineup of like Great Adventure, Great America, and Magic Mountain, AstroWorld started to slip down in the totem pole.
100%.
Six Flags was very thrifty with like acquiring perfectly good, relatively new rides secondhand, but they weren't putting them in parks like Magic Mountain and Great America. They were going to places like Six Flags St. Louis and AstroWorld. And Six Flags St. Louis always gets credited as being like the butt of the joke for the Six Flags chain, but let it be known.
But then imagine getting a ride from Six Flags St. Louis.
Yes, AstroWorld wasn't even for the second wave of looping coasters, the modern looping coaster second wave. Parks like Great America, Great Adventure, and Magic Mountain got custom 7-loop Aerodynamics looping coasters. Six Flags over Georgia and Six Flags over Texas got little, smaller, more modest Vekoma projects. Georgia's being secondhand from the Jersey Shore, and Texas is being, a low capacity, a boomerang, but still like nothing too crazy. Six Flags St. Louis, also secondhand, got their the Scream Machine from Expo 86, and AstroWorld got a Schwarzkopf looping star, a single vertical
which is
loop.
Just insane at a park with a Schwarzkopf flywheel launch shuttle loop.
It's like a downgrade, really.
It's very
Nagashima Spa Land cosplay era because they all had the Intamin Freefall, the Intamin Looping Starship, a looping star, and a shuttle loop. They were basically the same park at the time.
And let it be no mistake, I think this is one of the first indicators of them really starting to lower budgets and trying to minimize any sort of expenditures on AstroWorld. I feel like this is where the writing is on the wall, because I don't think it's a coincidence that they got the Schwarzkopf with the same train. But, like maintenance-wise, it was like, okay, great, this is the start of a maintenance situation. But I'm pretty sure this was really the first real indicator of like the writings on the wall, even though it's way before everything went catastrophic. And we'll talk about hypotheticals later in the episode, but I think personally this was like, okay, now suddenly AstroWorld's turning into a budget park, really.
Yeah,
exactly.
Tidal wave was one thing, but getting Six Flags St. Six Flags St. Louis getting Jetstream, the looping star, Schwarzkopf looping star, was already kind of a kick in the face after Six Flags Over Georgia and Six Flags Over Texas getting beautiful custom Schwarzkopf double loop coasters in 1978. And then Six Flags St. Louis, had to wait. They waited 3 years and they still got like a booger version of what the other parks had. It was just a pad coaster, a traveling style looping coaster that they just plunked down on the site of their Aero Stingray cars in the USA section. And Six Flags St. Louis, which also was kind of struggling its way through the 80s, had their 2 Aero mine trains, the dueling Aero mine train setup. And throughout most of the 80s, only one side operated. There was a year where they had stand-up coaster trains on one of them to kind of diversify the lineup, but that only lasted a month because it was a disaster. So by the late 80s, when it was time for Six Flags St. Louis to get their modern looper, they actually chucked one mine train and put the looper there. They put Ninja there, and then they chucked the Schwarzkopf single loop and sent it to AstroWorld. So Six Flags St. Louis kind of got a raw deal by losing 2 coasters, but at least they got a pretty modern, really marketable coaster. And AstroWorld got Viper, the blessed little Schwarzkopf looping star, which they finagled in that spot pretty nicely. It was a very tight squeeze in that little section there, adjacent to Skyscream. They made it work. They put the little tunnel on the drop, and like it's Viper because Six Flags was about to go all in on like these ride names that they were being shared throughout the chain. Like the following year, they did the real deal Viper, the Viper that is credited as being the Six Flags Viper ride, which is at Magic Mountain, but they technically did this one first. And I love how it's in Oriental Village, so like it has a dragon on it, but it's like a dragon Viper hybrid because they really wanted the name Viper, but it's a dragon. Like the logo for this ride is one of my favorite things ever. It predates the iconic like swirl spiral Viper logo that Magic Mountain had contracted, and this one it just is like a red dragony Viper snake creature.
And then I'm adding this little Oriental dragony vipery snake situation on the side of that little tunnel they installed. And it almost felt like they were just trying to do something, because I think even the general audience knew that having greased lightning was like already like a looping coaster with forwards and backwards and launch. Like, why are you doing a single loop?
This
like the tunnel was just something to throw at it.
Less impressive than a coaster that they had already had for over a decade.
I took a look at the brochures from when Viper opened, and they marketed that tunnel as the Viper's Pit. The Viper's Pit. You're going to go into the Viper's Pit.
And this tunnel was a tiny little tunnel, too. It was like you couldn't even hold like 2 cars.
That's classic. The
Viper's Pit. I'm dead.
Funny.
And you know what? Back then, it wasn't like social media was around or internet was a thing. So like you could say that, and it probably actually sold tickets. Like
I'm sure it did.
I can't imagine being somebody from Dallas who had Shockwave.
Yeah.
And then coming down to AstroWorld, it's like, here's our new for 1989. And it's like the booger version of Shockwave that opened in 1978. Right. I just can't imagine. Of course, we as enthusiasts, as Schwarzkopf people and lovers of vintage coasters, we would love Viper. We love Viper. We love Aero and Schwarzkopf and Vekoma little goober coasters. But at the time, this must have been a very sobering realization of the direction that AstroWorld was going in.
Though I will say, for AstroWorld's Direction, the next edition, and a year later, 1990, was of course not a recycled ride rotation program, whatever. But I will say it was one of the cooler editions because by 1990 added Ultra Twister, which is the only of its kind outside of Japan ever built. And even though it was a relocation for Seeker's Great Adventure, where I don't think it ever really made a lot of sense. For AstroWorld, I think it was actually a really cool fit. A couple of cool things about it is that they actually replaced the tilt mechanism for the vertical lift was actually replaced to be pushed way out. So it was already a long, drawn-out ride, and now it was pushed way out in order to accommodate a 45-degree lift hill. So all the Ultra Twisters around the world are vertical lift hill, but because of OSHA, whatever, other maintenance and evacuation reasons, they decided to modify the ride where the vehicle would just go back on a long track and then eventually tilt upward into a 45-degree standard lift hill and then have to drop. And this is also why I think Roller Coaster Tycoon has the lift hills at that angle, even though none of the other ones ever did that. It was really a modification. And then at the track switch at the end of the ride layout before you do your backwards twisty section back, they added some really weird, crazy upward ramp just in case the train wouldn't break down, so it would go in this half pipe. Super weird stuff. It made the ghost look completely Frankenstein. But this effectively had an Ultra Twister in the US. Looking. That's crazy stuff. I kept thinking, man, if I was around, I would have this would have been top of my list in America. This park would have been for the nerds.
Oh, 100%.
Top
100%.
of the list. And there's more nerd stuff to come, and some expansion we'll talk about in a second. But I think that was one of the coolest rides, and it was actually relocated again, believe it or not, to Six Flags America. Rest in peace. Rest in pieces. Because it never, of course, was constructed there either. Surprise, surprise. But yeah, cool ride nonetheless that they had.
I feel like this would have been a great fit for Six Flags America, especially at the time, because they had completely plateaued in their crazy, over-speculative development of the park. And this super high maintenance, low capacity, fussy little ride would have done great next to Batwing. They could have put it beyond, they could have put it corner, after Batwing. And it's this roller coaster is only for people who can find it. If you find it, congratulations. Because we can only run one 6-passenger vehicle at a time or some shit. That's how it would have gone down.
Maybe one of the two rides will be open on any given day. Yeah.
And let it be known that this is the pinnacle of the Nagashima Spa Land cosplay.
Yes.
Come on,
this
guys.
100%.
Really?
This is peak Nagashima Spa Land cosplaying.
They love it. So speaking of rides that are more common in Asia than they are in the States, in 1991, they install one of the 3 Husk Condors purchased by Six Flags for the ride rotation program, which each opened at Six Flags Grand Mountain, Mid-America, and Six Flags Great Adventure in 1988. The Six Flags St. Louis ride ran for 1 season before being sold to LaRonde. The Six Flags Magic Mountain one spent a year at each in Six Flags Magic Mountain and Six Flags AstroWorld before coming to the Great Escape. The Six Flags Great Adventure Condor actually ran for 2 seasons before reopening at Six Flags Great America, which opened in 1991 alongside the same time as the one at AstroWorld. And the one at Great America is it still there or was still there?
It's still there. She is still kicking, there. Baby. Yeah.
I love it.
But on this topic, the whole 1-year ride rotation program, I feel like they went off the rails for that situation. One season, I mean, at one point, is the shipping cost more expensive than anything you're going to get out of operating it? You know what I'm saying? Anyway, that's just always been wild to me. The one season at each, it's crazy. Anyway.
Oh, you know what, babe? You remember when I was putting this together and I was talking to our friend Mark Lacombe, who is also a huge theme park historian, and we could not crack the code on the timeline. Remember how I sent you this timeline for the Condor, and then right after I sent you an updated version? This is the old version. So realized...
give us the updated one.
Okay, so what we realized... So Magic Mountain had... So the part of them, all 3 opening in 1988, was accurate. One of them went to LaRonde, and we don't actually know which one. The one from Magic Mountain ran for 2 years, and then went to AstroWorld, but we don't know what happened to that one. It did not go to Great Escape. The one from Great Escape opened in 1989. So it actually predated. We found evidence of it existing before it went to AstroWorld. And of course, the one at Great Escape is still open. It's still there. The life and times of these 3 Condor rides in this era is so complicated and poorly documented. I spent an hour yesterday trying to find actual media evidence of the Condor existing at Six Flags St. Louis, and I cannot find any. I just ordered 2 issues of the National Historic Association of Amusement Parks newsletter that like references Six Flags St. Louis's Condor being installed. And then there's another issue later in 1988 where they talk about how they're all about to like get being sent to other parks. But all we know for sure, Six Flags St. Louis's definitely only ran for 1 year, 1 season, because it was replaced by Ninja. The Helix and the brake run for Ninja is right where that little flat ride plot was. So I think what happened was, since Six Flags St. Louis is definitely closed in 88, that one was probably the one that went to the Great Escape. That timeline would line up. And Six Flags didn't own Great Escape at the time, but they probably sold it.
I could see
the one at Magic Mountain ran for 88 and 89, and then they took it down, I guess, and sent it to... We found out that AstroWorld got the one from Magic Mountain because of a newspaper article that Mark found advertising the ride, and it actually said in the newspaper article that it came from Magic Mountain. So we're like, okay, hallelujah. Like, there's an answer.
Yeah.
And we don't... But even though it was only an AstroWorld for 1 year, and then it was sold, we don't know where it went. It could be anywhere. Any of the ones that wound up in Asia after the fact in the 90s, it could have been the one that ran at Magic Mountain and AstroWorld. But the one from St. Louis is almost certainly either the one at Laron or the one at Great Escape, but we're not sure.
Gotcha.
And then the only easy one, the only cut and dry one is the one at Great Adventure. Like, we know for a fact that it was at Great Adventure for 2 years and then went to Great America in 1991, where it stayed, where it runs to this day. And the Great Escape one is still running too. So we still have 2 in the United States. You guys, this is my favorite flat ride in the world. I love the Husk Condor so much.
I was raced in the Husk Condor. Don't tell me about it.
It is absolutely one of the most aesthetically pleasing flat rides. And I still think like a very like cross-family flat ride, if that makes sense. As someone 100%. Who doesn't like getting scrambled too much, like it is a enjoyable experience still.
I have nothing but good experiences on those rides. Yeah.
We have ridden many around the world.
But mine just got ripped out too. Mine is officially closed now.
I know.
Sadness.
I'm kicking myself for not riding the one at Slaharim when it was still there, because we were there, but we didn't have time to ride it. Between the 2 of us, Sean and I have ridden Husk Condors in 8 different countries.
They are a 5 countries,
icon. Global icon.
Such a random fun fact about yourself. Maybe I should use that sometime on some like random podcast. Like, give yourself a fun fact.
The only reason I know it's 8 is because the only country that you've ridden a Condor that I have not is the one at Slaharan. I've ridden alone 7 Condors in 7 different countries, and you've ridden most of those. You've ridden a lot of those with me, but not all of them. But you do have the Netherlands as a country that you have ridden a Condor in that I have not. So I know between the 2 of us, we have ridden Condors in 8 different countries in 3 different continents.
Yeah, that's good.
Gene Staples at Indiana Beach, if you're listening.
We got to get back on track, Alex.
Fix that Condor and rebuild it.
So you're going to introduce the next era of the Spark.
This is my favorite Six Flags era, but also kind of a sad era for AstroWorld. Maybe sad's not the right word, but I feel like it was still very indicative of what was happening with AstroWorld. The Time Warner era, which lasted from 1993 to 1998, started with a majority stake from Time Warner in 1990, and then they took majority ownership of the Six Flags chain in 1993. So 1991 was when Time Warner, like Warner Brothers properties, Batman and stuff, really started to they started to take action. In 1992 was when the Six Flags park started receiving Batman-themed attractions. Six Flags Great America famously got Batman the Ride.
And AstroWorld was early to the game.
Shows.
Because AstroWorld was early to the game because in 1993, the most Time Warner thing ever happened. And we touched upon this earlier, when they reused that Alpine structure. But Batman the Escape, which was a recycled ride, surprise, surprise, was added to Six Flags AstroWorld, and this was the third home for it. It was the prototype Intamin stand-up coaster, which had opened at Six Flags Magic Mountain originally, who had the first stand-up coaster, right? Is that technically correct?
Yeah, that was
they had the first Intamin stand-up, yes. The first four across.
And then it went to Six Flags Great Adventure, and they were known as Shockwave in both. And the layout really wasn't that thrilling, but this was still a pretty decent sized ride in 1993. And in a tradition, of course, of Time Warner era, we gave it a massive thematic upgrade. So instead of it just being like a plot of land with a coaster plopped on it, now we had a really cool queue, like we mentioned earlier, a laser show, and what else not. And they built a bat cave, and that unfortunately was actually kind of short lived because the reuse of the Alpine sleigh facade and the show building for the queue was eventually just retired because of maintenance reasons, and the queue was just an outdoor queue, which is so sad, because I feel like most of these attractions all still have their original queues, and there's always a highlight of a Six Flags park because there's that little era of actual nice theming. But if Six Flags Astro would have still been around, I mean, it doesn't matter. It would have been cut such a long time ago. And then, of course, the ride was then once again relocated once it closed in 2005. And it was relocated to Darien Lake, where it sat in the grass and was never constructed.
Aw. His tale as old as time. In 1995, we have another one of the most Time Warner era rides. So Time Warner had been doing these like themed dark ride coasters at the Six Flags parks throughout the 90s. But of course, for AstroWorld, they weren't going to build it from the ground up. They purchased an indoor Vekoma coaster from Boblo Island outside of Detroit, but on the Canadian side. And it is and it was an enclosed Vekoma MK700. It was one of only two Vekoma MK700s with the inline seating. They have these telescopic lap bars. The other one being Chaos at Opryland. This ride is still running. It was purchased by Wonderland and Amarillo and now operates as Hornet alongside AstroWorld's gunslinger Chance Yo-Yo. Though Wonderland did not build a new building for it. So it now is an outside coaster, which makes its very specific right turn heavy layout real
so
obvious.
Goofy, but it's so
Such a funny layout for outside,
It's just like...
It reminds me of the Space Diver, Magic Mountains.
Yeah, exactly.
What's it called again? Oh my God, I'm blanking.
Flashback. Yeah,
Flashback.
The Intamin Z-Force flashback.
It's like, oh, this was clearly designed to be in a box.
But it's so funny to me that they built like Skull Mountain. They built, what is it called? What is the one at
Runaway
Texas
Mountain
called?
Six Flags Over
Runaway
Texas.
Mountain at Six Flags Over Texas. And they were like, I guess we can do that for AstroWorld. Is there one lying around that we can get for cheap somewhere?
Yeah,
that was
completely
time
different
to
rides.
find.
The Great Adventure and Six Flags Over
credit,
Texas got custom from the ground up rides.
Yeah.
And AstroWorld got its fourth consecutive relocated roller coaster.
But another,
and Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I would say that's another I didn't even think about this prior to this episode. It's not a good indicator how Time Warner actually cared. Of course, it's also in the timeline of Paramount Park starting to kind of gear things up, and they're starting to get interested in doing the whole Flight of Fear thing. Like, of course, the competitor is also shaping up, but Time Warner was like, when all things considered, really the one that I think spent the most money at the time. Of course. Anyway. Doesn't matter. Continue.
You have to give them credit for the theming. Like they might have bought a relocated ride, but just like Batman, they were like, this park needs the cheaper option, but we're still going to do the extensive theming because they built like a whole Mayan pyramid.
They came a long way from the Viper Pit.
Yes. We're no longer at the Viper Pit.
The Viper Pit was a far cry from a custom indoor Mayan temple. This was so Indiana Jones coded. It's almost as if,
for sure.
It's almost as if it opened the same year as Indiana Jones at Disneyland, which it did. Everybody was doing Mayan temples.
They were.
And to its credit, go ahead.
I was going to say, this era of theming was not to last because, Alex, you're going to introduce the next era and the last era of the park.
the death sentence.
So Premier Parks acquired the Six Flags Entertainment Corporation in 1998. Premier's massive debt from aggressive park acquisition was further aggravated by unprofitable years for the Six Flags parks. This high debt meant that additions and investments had to be scaled back. So the final thing that we got from the premiere or from the Time Warner era, because it was 1998 was when that changeover happened. We got one last Time Warner era hurrah in 1998. I think it's one of the most likable and well-intended things that they tried to do, even though it was kind of a disaster.
So this was, again, the Taz's Texas Tornado, which was the iconic Schwarzkopf thriller, which debuted on the German Fair Circuit in 1986. So is iconic, but again, not exactly a new ride. It had been acquired by...
fit.
No. Again, it had been acquired by Gruneland in 1996 before coming to AstroWorld. And the ride was the strategic choice because, again, this park had 2 Schwarzkopf loopers. And so maintenance-wise, they knew the train type, like all that fun stuff as well. Unfortunately, Thriller was played...
I see the vision.
Yeah, I can understand it. It's like the Aero mice, you know what I mean? They were like, we can do this. Like, it's going to be easy. Unfortunately, the ride was plagued with issues due to its unique nature and its intense forces, and it suffered extensive downtime during its time at AstroWorld, operating sporadically until the end of the 2000 season, and then standing dormant on its site until 2002. And this was in the Plaza de Fiesta, and they it tried to integrate it kind of cutely into the Spanish style architecture.
It actually looked pretty decent, in my opinion. Yeah,
it looked. They did a good job integrating, I think.
This is the same year. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say the ride would receive lots of upgrades and eventually by Premier Rides, which would reshape a lot of the double loop sequence to be less intense, and then was relocated to Six Flags Marine World, where it opened as Zonga. Nevertheless, the ride's problems persisted, and after 2 seasons, the ride was sold to Isla San Marcos Parque Temático in, I have no clue,
Aguas Calientes.
Thank you. The Central Province of Mexico, where it ran from 2008 till around 2013, and then eventually was sold to Germany's Skyline Park in 2013, but never reinstalled.
I did not know that it was actually sold to Skyline Park. It would have been a ride that I would see them actually operate. Funny enough,
they still have it. I don't know. Well, allegedly, they probably scrapped it, but that was the
but
last
no offense, though.
Thing.
Everything that Premier Ride touches that isn't their own, it goes to shit.
Turns to shit.
It's so true.
No offense, babes, but it's just like the writing was on the wall when the moment they started touching it. They've ruined some of my favorites, so no love there.
Ian, I wanted to say that your point of them incorporating it with the Mexican area is so spot on. And not only that, but with giving it Tasmanian Devil. It was very 1998. The last hurrah for Time Warner. This is what they were doing at Fiesta Texas, just a few hours away. Because in 97 and 98, they were building e-ticket rides and giving Looney Tunes characters the star treatment. You had Roadrunner Express. You had the Bugs Bunny Wild Vasaban. You had Taz's Texas Tornado. I love that Time Warner loved the Looney Tunes tie-in with the park so much, and they had such a huge success with the DC Comics ride themes that right there at the end they were like, we're the Looney Tunes, we're gonna give Looney Tunes these e-ticket rides. We're not just gonna relegate them to the kiddie areas. We're building brand new major roller coasters and rides and stuff, and we're giving them to the Looney Tunes. They're for everybody. Even the most aggressive looping coaster in recorded history gets to be themed to a Looney Tunes character.
I will say that was always so funny to me. I was like, wait, really, Taz? Taz? Because maybe because it's a mean character, and I was young, but I was always baffled by the fact that there was a Looney Tunes character ride that was this kind of baller attraction.
Yeah, that intense, right?
Anyway, so now, of course, there is a new management company / ownership involved, and Premier Parks loves the SLC. Who doesn't? And so, of course, in 1999, they decided that AstroWorld needs one. And so, on the previous plot occupied by Excalibur, which was the earlier mentioned crazy, weird Aero mine train coaster situation, they go ahead and they took that out and they replaced it with Serial Thriller. which came as one of the famous investment packages. So Premier Parks love nothing more than acquiring a park and then spending an ungodly amount of stupid money, and then never getting any money back out of it. And AstroWorld was actually no exception to this rule. So they got a $15 million investment package, which back then obviously was more than now. And they took the Accelerator spot by the freeway, like I just mentioned, to put the new most marketable ride, which is an inverted coaster, which I will say in 1999 was actually still a baller move. It was actually like one of the nicer additions in a long time for the park. So that was kind of nice for them. And they took that Serial Thriller name, which we'd already seen around in a couple of their parks, actually. It was kind of like the signature name. And then Serial Thriller closed with the park in 2005, and then was shipped to Great Escape for a few years, which it was never erected there. But it did eventually go to Canada, and it opened in La Ronde as the park's second inverted coaster, which is definitely a choice because they already had a Batman clone. Vampire, I think is the name, right? And they opened the SOC right next to it. And you know what? It was actually kind of successful. It was actually kind of popular, but it's still standing there right now. So Ednar Latak opened in, 2010? And it's still standing today. So Serial Thriller lives.
Let it be known that the only two roller coasters operating from AstroWorld to this day are the two Vekomas, because Vekomas are tanks.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they are.
And this was the first new coaster for AstroWorld in 15 years, because the last time they got a ground-up coaster was the other suspended coaster in the park, Accelerate. It broke a five-coaster trend of relocated coasters for this park.
And I will say, when your park is littered with all the rides it is littered with, getting a Serial Thriller is like a serial upgrade. Like, come on. Like, that's kind of cool, you know?
Oh, absolutely. It would have been exciting.
This point, it was another reason why, I mean, they didn't just do this because, like, Six Flags hates AstroWorld. AstroWorld had the best maintenance department team in the regional park industry.
They kept getting hand-downs.
They were forged in the fire of necessity. They were kings. They had a lot of fun with it. Stuff like Accelerate, turning the last four vehicles backwards and stuff. Like they were just sky's the limit. They did whatever they wanted because they had an Ultra Twister. They had 3 Schwarzkopfs. They had all of this wild stuff, and they just made it work. Like AstroWorld was just the right choice. If you had a ride that was finicky or troubled, and if it was going to have a chance, you could send it to AstroWorld, and they would probably maybe be able to get it to work.
But I also still think that AstroWorld became the dumping ground for these rides because, like, they were just the last effort to squeeze a penny out of it. Because it's not like AstroWorld this was making money. The whole chain wasn't making money, and that's a conversation we're going to have shortly. But I just think that AstroWorld also really got this short end of the stick.
Yeah. Right. Finally, in 2003, the last measurable expenditure came to AstroWorld in the form of Diablo Falls and the Sky SWAT. Diablo Falls is a Whitewater West raft slide. AstroWorld was a water ride park experience through and through. You could never say that there was a water ride trend that existed in the history of the park that AstroWorld did not partake in. Everything from on-ticket water parks, the invention of the Rapids ride, prototype Shoot the Chute, water slides in the dry park and in the wet park, and then finally Diablo Falls, and then the short-lived SNS Sky SWAT, which was a cool ride and probably another little playground for the incredible maintenance department at AstroWorld.
Right.
Both of these rides replaced the Taz's Texas Tornado and also the Sky Needle, the Astro Needle, which had been retired in 1999. They operated at the park for 3 years. I think the Sky SWAT was probably a little bit on the finicky side. I don't know if it operated super consistently, but both rides closed with the park in 2005, and both rides were sent to Six Flags New England, where the New England operated both rides for several years. I want to say both of them ran for about 10 more years. Now they're both gone. But those were 2 rides that, because they were basically brand new when they got relocated, they were actually assembled and repurposed.
And that leads us to the actual park sale or the park closure in 2005. So in August of 2005, Six Flags announced it was selling its chain of theme parks. And this is, and for just the theme park nerds already know that by the time this rolled around, Six Flags as a corporation was in such terrible shape. The writing was on the wall for years, and AstroWorld was obviously one of the first assets to get cut because it was just not making the money that some other assets were, and it was sitting in Houston, and everything. Ground in Houston is surprisingly valuable for not occupying anything. Anyway, so after having to part with all the European parks and having to part with, of course, Six Flags Worlds of Adventure, and we'll dive into this a little bit more in just a few seconds, eventually it did come down to Six Flags AstroWorld being closed. So there's a couple of reasons that we'll discuss, but the final date of operation was October 30th, 2005, and Six Flags would then spend $20 million to demolish the park just to make it attractive for a developer. And guess what? Of course, as we opened the episode with, the park still... The land still sits empty. It gets occasionally used to park some stuff for the Houston Rodeo or whatever, and that's it. Sad stuff. But yeah, so let's go ahead and dive. Go ahead, Alex.
Oh yeah, Hurricane Katrina happened also the same year and wiped out Six Flags New Orleans. So like 2005 was the year. Yeah, that because
New
fell.
Orleans, not like they made any money on that. Yeah. Because at least for AstroWorld, they got money out of it, which the chain needed so desperately. But yeah, I mean, at what cost? Because then you've got, of course, a destroyed park down the street in
$20 million just to level the park is so sad.
I know.
Well, and I don't think they ended up, because I think the original estimate was they're going to be able to sell the land for like $160 million or something like that. I think they ended up getting like under $100 million or something. Like it was like
100%.
Like,
yeah, it was something like that.
It was like a weird bait and switch. But I guess we can go into, I don't know, this is definitely going to be a two-parter. But I guess that we can go into kind of some of the reasons it failed. And I think one of the big one is the Six Flags, namely Premier Park Six Flags, because like their expansion of portfolios was up to 31 parks, which is insane.
Absurd.
And they were also trying to expand and invest in all these parks in totally unfounded ways, right? Like, so this is the Six Flags Six Flags World of Adventure. Like, you know what I mean? This is the era where they're just like, if we do it, they'll come, you know? And you got to appreciate their like gumption, but like they failed to make a profit for 5 years since 1998. So they acquire the parks from Time Warner and then failed to turn a profit on parks that were during the Time Warner era relatively profitable. You know what I mean? Like it's not like they were like they acquired like failing parks. You know what I mean? They just spent so much on capital expenditures that like, of course it's not going to be profitable when you're spending $20-30 million per park to build new rides, you know?
And it was super unsustainable because when you look at the acquisitions, there was honestly no market research. Like you acquire Great Adventure, which has been doing great for pretty much since its inception, but then you're adding 25 new attractions, including major roller coasters and major flat rides and kind of a dark ride kind of attraction. So this is not a sustainable thing. You're not hiring the right amount of maintenance to take care of it. You're obviously never going to see a return on investment right away on 25 new rides. Why not one ride a year for 25 years, right?
Right.
Why 25 rides all at once? Then you're buying theme parks in Europe that are located not close to freeways, not in easy accessible areas for your staffing to come from, like Six Flags Holland. And now you pump in the largest coaster, or maybe the most impressive coaster collection of Europe. That's not working out. Then you're buying Move Park Germany. You're going into an agreement with Warner Brothers, and you're installing a movie studio type theme park and expecting Disneyland Paris results. Back to back to back, it was like a misfire. Alex always likes to say that it was kind of like a 90s altruistic kind of like excitement for the new millennium. Like, oh, we're going to invest. It's going to be great. But of course, it was super, super unsustainable. I just cannot believe this, that the investors in the boardroom were like, yo, stop, like right away. Like, what are you doing? You know, I mean, like, please hold.
Yo, stop. That's so true. Stop. They should have stopped after Batwing. They should have been like, okay, stop.
Yeah.
Poor
I was going to say,
AstroWorld.
it's definitely that 90s era, and it's also the era of, like, globalization. You know what I mean? Like, we're talking about, like, we're kind of facing the effects of that now, of the economy. It seemed like the debt was limitless, right? You can go into debt for any corporation if you wanted to, if you were a company. And it felt like the return was going to be limitless because it felt like we could keep expanding our markets. And that's just not the case, obviously.
Interesting case study for sure.
Yeah, I think it's interesting in terms of where it fits in the global economics of things. But kind of as a result of that, Sean, you were going to talk about, like, this decision to sell off these parks.
Yeah, so in order to recoup costs, the easiest thing to do was just sell off parks and just get money back for land. Economy wasn't terrible yet because, 9/11 hadn't happened to tourism yet. So, like, it was kind of still, I think, they were still optimistic to recoup costs. But of course, the lower parks on the totem pole were all going to get cut, and so that included AstroWorld. AstroWorld was kind of early in the whole game because Darien Lake were to follow, Kentucky Kingdom followed. Like, all those parks were eventually also kind of part of this problem. But all the parks in Europe, a lot of North American parks had to close because it would eventually to close. Elitch Gardens was sold off. A lot of these parks were sold off, and they didn't care what happened to them, whether they were sold off to another operator, which happened for Darien Lake, which happened for Elitch Gardens. Or whether they were just sold off because the land was good for apartments. At this point, Six Flags just needed to recoup any sort of costs and relocate whatever they could relocate if the park was going to get demolished in the case of AstroWorld. But that was one of the main reasons, I think, and we'll talk about this a little bit when we discuss hypotheticals, but it would have maybe not even been the end of AstroWorld if it wasn't for, they just need to cut so many parks. AstroWorld was the easy choice, I think.
I think so. Of the American parks, it was probably one of the easiest. Like, after your
100%,
which is the easiest of the legacy Six Flags parks, like the ones that like that 7 that you were talking about, Alex. Like, it was probably the easiest option. It's curious,
especially
that St.
after
Louis
Fiesta Texas came into the. At one point they had these 3 Texas parks, and 2 of them were thriving. Fiesta Texas was a rock star. It is still Fiesta Texas has done nothing but accrue rock star status for its entire existence. It gets everything it wants. Fiesta Texas can do no wrong.
No, truly. And, like, I mean, you feel that effect even in the way Over Texas was before recently. You know what I mean? Like, so I do think that's had to be part of it. Even though, as we'll talk about more, like, Houston is not attached to those markets. That's, like, what's so frustrating about all of this is, like, yes, it's one state, but, like, that is a totally different region from the other 2 parks.
But people in a boardroom, Premier Parks, you could never convince Premier Parks to see it that way, which is what's so sad.
Right.
They really thought that they could just make all of this money by demolishing AstroWorld and selling the land. And I bet that if they had known just how inadequate their compensation would be for that piece of land, they might not have closed it. Like, it was
I think
all
you're
about
right.
Best case scenario. They were taking a risk on this whole operation because of what could have been the best case scenario for them, and ended up being a pretty not good deal. And the people of Houston were just
risk management,
collateral damage for this experiment for them.
It's also worth noting, and Alex, I'm going to jump onto your next point just because it's one that I really want to talk about.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Is that during the Premier era, so starting in '98, we see this lack of maintenance in the parks, right? This is something that's well documented across the board. It is going to suffer. The parks that are going to suffer the most are the older parks. And so I think AstroWorld's is one of the older parks in terms of infrastructure and in terms of the quality of bathrooms and restaurants and eateries and all of that stuff, parking. And so this is something that you mentioned, it is well known that they had aging infrastructure that was not being correctly maintained towards the end of its life. And the quality of the guest experience had suffered because of it.
They also had, as the park that was collecting all of these vintage and finicky rides, they had a lot of rides that were either at the end of their service life or approaching the end of their service life at the same time, because most of these rides were just older than the public was necessarily privy to. Every coaster there, except for Serial Thriller, dates back to like the mid 80s or earlier. And this park is, it's 2005. And every ride in this park just has so many miles on it. It was like...
Yeah, the depreciation of the equipment.
It was almost inevitable because these rides, aside from like Serial Thriller and some of the newer flat rides and stuff, I mean, this was a park full of ticking time bombs, of rides that there was no future for a lot of these rides. It's funny, it tickles me to think that like they still sent some of these rides to different parks as if they really were going to get another 10 years out of Ultra Twister or the Looping Star,
And Alex, I think you make an interesting point here, and it's something that I hadn't really thought about much, but in the long term of operating AstroWorld, there's gonna come a point, kind of like Ian and kind of mentioned too as well, is that there's aging infrastructure. All your rides are old. They're all at their end of their lifespans of their operating, expectations. You're gonna have to put in a lot of money in order to keep this park. The 10-year plan for AstroWorld was probably kind of scary for them, because what are they gonna do with AstroWorld the next 10 years? You're gonna have to update so much. You're gonna have to invest so much money, and the last thing Six Flags was in the business of doing was investing anything. And so, and I think the reason that they actually send some of those rides to other parks is because if you're gonna spend $20 million demolishing the park, at that point, just take the pieces apart and ship them somewhere. Like, it's not that much more expensive than just demolishing something and then clearing it up and sending it to the scrapyard. You might as well clear it up and send it to another park, which is also why I think they didn't really care to build the other rides anywhere else. I don't really think they really cared if they ever got erected at Darien Lake, because at that point, it didn't add anything to the price tag, I don't think, to relocate them. But I never really quite thought of that. AstroWorld being so old.
They were like, well, maybe we'll reconstruct this, right? Like, who knows? But yeah, it almost feels like Six Flags America closing this year is echoing a very similar situation where you have so every major coaster at AstroWorld, aside from Serial Thriller, was either from like the 1960s to like the mid 80s. And so after 20 years after the mid 80s, the park closes and a lot of these rides are at the end of their service life. Six Flags America does not have a coaster younger than like 25 years at this point, if I'm not mistaken. Every coaster in that park is like 25 years old or older. So
they're also like a ride relocation program kind of park,
where you have all of these coasters that are in need of major refurbishments at the same time because they're all the same age. And it's such a huge financial burden for a park to take on, which can completely dismantle a park's future. It can totally...
Interestingly, another thing I hadn't really thought about, of course, Six Flags America closing, Six Flags AstroWorld closing. But yeah, you know what? You're kind of right, because they're kind of in the same boat, and the writing was on the wall for a long time. Think about it. Six Flags America, they've got a couple of new flat rides, but, they got Apocalypse and then turned into Firebird, kind of reusing. They got their Raging Cajun spinning coaster, kind of reusing. I guess in a way, maybe it's not quite as dire as AstroWorld, but I think the timelines are kind of parallel. And now when it's time to sell off assets, the park's actual equipment is worth probably less than just selling it off for apartments, which is kind of what's happening right now.
So much of what they have has been depreciating. The fact that their newest coaster, from a manufacturing standpoint, is the Wild Mouse, and it's 20 years old. They've got a B&M coaster that's older than me. They've got a hypercoaster that's 25 years old. They have a Vekoma Flying Dutchman that has no future. They have a Premier Launch coaster that is completely energy inefficient.
First gen, expensive to operate.
It honestly makes so much more sense now, thinking about it in the AstroWorld context, than it did when they announced it. Because it's like, no wonder the park is closing. They don't have an asset that isn't like on death row.
Well,
and again, how are we going to fix this park? Go ahead, Ian.
No, I was going to say, did you guys see the headline yesterday that like there's a group of investors that's suing Six Flags for being misled at the condition of the legacy Six Flags parks? So they are suing Six Flags Entertainment Corporate, whatever the new Six Flags is, for misleading investors of former legacy Cedar Fair investors at the condition of the Six Flags parks before they took them on. Which I'm like, interesting. I don't know if it seems like a long shot, but I do think there probably is some truth to that, right? Like they were in worse shape than people thought they would be, is what they're saying.
I would totally say that's actually kind of accurate, because if you look at, you can say what you want about Cedar Fair parks, legacy and how they're always kind of sterile, and how like Michigan Adventures have a whole lot going on, but it's always been clean, it's always been maintained, it's always been presentable. And you go to some of these Six Flags parks, I mean, like, you're lucky the wall isn't caving in on you in a restroom at Six America. Stuff like that is very serious neglect at Six Flags parks. And it's true. Like, it's kind of across the chain. And like, you step into Six Flags Great America and then you step into California's Great America. We don't have to tell each other that Six Flags Great America is rotting away, even though it has the better lineup, while California's Great America has refurbished restrooms in every corner of the park. The two companies have had very different business models, and I can totally see someone believing there's some sort of value in a Six Flags park and then stepping in there and realizing that the amount of money it costs to bring it up to these legacy Cedar Fair standards, which is what I'm hoping they're going to do, is a lot larger sum than they were led to believe. I can totally see it.
That's what Siebert's doing in Texas, right? Like, he's taking over Six Flags Over Texas and trying to do that. But that's expensive, and it costs a lot of money. Fiesta Texas's model is not cheap. You know what I mean? Anyways, kind of to the point, I think that probably was part of what was happening here too. Like, they were like the actual like physical parking lot, the toll booths, all that stuff definitely was probably an even upgrade, because looking at the Six Flags parks as they are now, I can't imagine how AstroWorld would look now. Do you know what I mean? Like, thinking about, again, those rides that were on the end of their service life. And then, not to mention this infrastructure that's from 1968, that Dual was a genius, but like, bathrooms and buildings were not built the same in 68. You know what I mean? Like,
I'm sure it's akin to Magic Mountain's campground bathrooms, where like the toilets are inside and the sinks are outside, that kind of stuff.
So Ian, it's funny you mentioned that, because I wrote this as my first discussion topic for later, and you know what, at this point we can just mention the discussion topic, because I think it ties in pretty well with the reasons that the park closed. My first discussion topic was, would AstroWorld still have been around if Six Flags were more financially stable in 2005? And now that we're discussing this, I don't think it would have been around even if Six Flags was on top of the world, because the park was just aging so hard.
The only thing that would have saved it is a sale to a different company. Like, the fact is, it would not have survived the 2005, even post 2005 to the 2010s, I guess, of Six Flags.
The recession would have killed this park.
Weathered that. It would have killed it completely.
No chance.
Not that Houston wouldn't be able to support it. This is the thing. I think the fact is the market could still support the theme park, but this park had been so neglected in a way that, unlike Six Flags St. Louis, which to me, actually, oddly enough, the last Six Flags park built from the ground up, it has the clearest layout of any of the Six Flags parks that were the original three. And it's always been kept kind of simple. That one was able to weather the storm. But AstroWorld is like the layout and everything, the buildings, the infrastructure, it just seems like it was too complicated. The ride lineup was obviously too complicated to sustain itself. And so what happens when your Intamin stand-up, like you said, your Togo Ultra Twister and your
Schwarzkopf shuttle loop and
Schwarzkopf shuttle loop all bite the dust at the same time. You know what I mean?
No, you're right. I think that would have made no sense. Yeah.
Now, if it had been acquired by like Six Flags, like by Cedar Fair, there's a possibility Cedar Fair would have known how to downscale the park and build it back up again, because that's what they're good at. But I don't think if under Six Flags, I think 2008 would have killed it, like, for sure. The recession would have been the end.
I don't even know if Cedar Fair could have saved it, because it would have taken a lot for it to come back and to downscale and rebuild. And I think after the Jaga Lake fiasco, they just wouldn't have.
Right.
Like, they just simply would have been like, no, like, it's not. The concept of taking a park that has been overbuilt and is coming apart and shrinking it to and then building it back, it just doesn't work. You shrink it, and then people lose interest, and then it's not profitable, and then the park closes.
Also, Six Flags at that time kind of started getting a status. This was chain-wide, but AstroWorld was definitely part of it, for just being kind of run down, kind of unsafe for maybe like younger teens, being maybe not as pleasant of an experience because of maybe the clientele and attendance they were just like Six Flags was literally just, we all know this term, like just like giving away the gate and then like hoping they can make money on games and food inside. That was Six Flags business model, and it's kind of still their model. And it's never worked out. And AstroWorld was definitely a part. It's like the annual passes were so cheap, season passes, that the park was overrun with teenagers. And again, Magic Mountain had the same problem. Don't ask anyone in Santa Cruz Valley about the early 2000s, because same problem. But like AstroWorld was not exempt from this. So the status, the whole idea of AstroWorld, like I think the general public had like a kind of negative idea of AstroWorld by the time it closed too.
Yeah, I agree. I think that and this is a reason I think, again, you can recover from that if you're maintaining your park. Do you know what I mean? Like they weren't.
Well, Magic is a great example. They made that really important kind of agreement that they had with the Los Angeles County Sheriff. They opened a sheriff's office on site. They had sheriff inside the park. And Magic Mountain turned around. They extended that contract a few years ago. They still have the sheriff on premises. They're in the parks. And Magic Mountain now, I mean, like you would send your kid. Like in LA, you know Six Flags is safe. But again, 20 years ago, you wouldn't send your kid to Six Flags, you know?
Park. And like
it's like a whole different, like it's possible, but AstroWorld just didn't have the bones to do that. AstroWorld was just
no, which is sad because I still think the AstroWorld, like the original layout that Duel designed, would have been really easy to maintain. Do you know what I mean? Like it should have been an easy park to maintain, but it's just the way they handled infrastructure. Just I don't know. But if you look at pictures of the park in its final year, you're like,
I know it looked kind of grimy.
It's looking a little dusty. You know what I mean?
She's seen better days. So here's another question for you guys. Then, first of all, how much of the San Antonio Park's 80s, 90s, early 2000s success do you think has contributed to AstroWorld's lackluster performance in the later years? Do you think San Antonio is not that close, but Texas is big and people travel. Do you think having a solid collection of parks in San Antonio between SeaWorld and of course, Six Flags, do you think there was ever kind of like almost like why Miami doesn't have a theme park because Orlando is so built up, you know what I'm saying?
I feel like Ian was right when he said that like these are not overlapping markets, and even though Houston, San Antonio, and Dallas are like geographically relatively close together, it's not like you're getting a bunch of people doing day trips to these places back and forth. However, people go to SeaWorld. SeaWorld is a destination experience, and I wouldn't be surprised if the global specter of having a SeaWorld park in San Antonio like really hurt AstroWorld. SeaWorld opened in 1988. That was the year that the shit started
80s
going
and
down
90s.
in AstroWorld.
Yeah.
And then Fiesta Texas opened in 92, and like we said, Fiesta Texas has brought rockstar energy to the industry every day that it's existed from 92 onward. And part of the reason why it is such the superstar for Six Flags is because it's so new, and they don't have bathrooms from 1968 to maintain and rebuild.
I think you're right, because if you look at San Antonio, first of all, it's much more of a tourism destination anyway. So people that are going to visit out of state, who's going to go to Houston, right? That's first of all. Second of all, with the Marine Park being such a slam hit in like 80s, 90s being like the prime years, even early 2000s for like the whole the whole SeaWorld concept. I mean, these parks were doing so well. And then, of course, having Six Flags being built, I can see people from Houston choosing to go on a weekend trip to San Antonio versus going to the rundown park with the 3 freaking Schwarzkopf loopers down the street. So I think in a way it did, and like you said, kind of Alex, with like the timeline of the 80s, kind of showing SeaWorld opening and AstroWorld's attendance slowly, or the whole situation with AstroWorld kind of going downhill. Even though they're not the same markets, I can definitely personally see maybe they're being influenced there.
I would agree. I would say that that the local, I think, Alex, the SeaWorld connection is so spot on, because San Antonio already is the city you go on a weekend trip to for Texas. You know what I mean? Like, it's the nicest city in the state. No offense to the rest of the cities.
Love San Antonio.
It's a gem. Yeah. It's one of my favorite cities in the country.
It's a place you can go to visit.
I love it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Like, it is like a beautiful place to visit. So I think that when your regional park is that bad, it becomes a problem. It's important, though, that you said San Antonio, not Dallas, because I don't think the Dallas park was ever competing with Houston.
Oh, no. Dallas was also kind of run down for a while. Yeah.
God, Dallas,
in fact, it's still run down.
Went last year. I went last year and I was like, Jeffrey Siebert, we need you, my hero. Come save us.
No, it's like my least favorite Six Flags park.
I need new bathrooms. Can you paint some of these buildings so they're not cartoon yellow? Like...
And then can you also like take away all the asphalt that you just recently poured because it looks worse than before? Yeah, I know.
Oh God, it looks so bad. It looks so bad.
Oh my God, that park is so ugly.
We say a little prayer because that park should be so much prettier than it is, but it's not. And that's how you know it's
that's
not
the original.
It's not. It's so bad. It
should be the Disneyland of Disneylands. You know what I'm saying? Like, it should be the Six Flags of Six Flags.
It should be the Disneyland of Six Flags, but it's not. Instead, St. Louis is the Disneyland of Six Flags, but you didn't hear that from me. And I do think that the kind of the connection to San Antonio is partially there, but I really think that they just screwed themselves in the marketplace. It sounds like the more you read about it, the more you're like, you guys really put yourself in a corner, because 8 million people and growing in Houston as a population should be able to support a decent sized regional park with just 100%. Summer attendance. You know what I mean? And so to me, I'm like, I think that the mistakes of the park were, yes, aggravated potentially by San Antonio's rise and with SeaWorld and with Fiesta Texas and making it a better weekend destination. But like for like the average kid, right? And we're talking about like teenagers, but also like young families. Why wouldn't you want to go to like your a nicely maintained theme park with really good roller coasters? The problem is this park is neither nicely maintained nor has really good roller coasters. So now like, what is the point of going to your local amusement park then?
And like, let's face it, like Six Flags acquired Fiesta Texas in 96, right? So this is mid-90s, SeaWorld's doing well. Now Six Flags has kind of their eyes on this new park, and like, I hate to say it, but the shiny new toy metaphor, it's always going to be real.
100%.
You know, like you acquire this park that has a lot more going for it than AstroWorld. You actually have a market you're competing in heavily. San Antonio's not a market to underinvest in. Of course, I feel like Six Flags kind of gave up on AstroWorld altogether. They were just letting it truck along until it made no more money, and then it said close it. I feel like maybe that would have been the plan all along anyway.
Yeah, you have once you acquire Fiesta Texas, it's like, okay, you have the brand new, like shiny new toy, and you have the OG. You have Six Flags Over Texas.
Yeah, like AstroWorld didn't fit in that picture anymore.
It's just the third Six Flags in Texas.
Yeah,
it suddenly is relegated to such a unnecessary position in their lineup as far as they're concerned. But like, again, the people of Houston are just kind of collateral damage. It's not attractive enough in their overall portfolio for them to care about. It doesn't matter that there's people that would go if it was decent. It's just too much.
Thing we cannot forget about the closure, and I did put in the notes, and I'll just take this one, is that since the start of AstroWorld, there had been a agreement about parking, right? Because the whole point was you're going to park at Astrodome and then you're going to go to the park.
Go over.
And then when they built the Reliance Stadium and that same plot of like the Astro situation, right? Yeah. They had an agreement with Reliance Stadium that they're going to use their parking because, again, there was no parking lot for AstroWorld. So they had to use the parking lot for Reliance Stadium. And that entire agreement ended in 2005. And Reliance Stadium did not actually want to extend the parking lot agreement with Six Flags. So now you're getting Six Flags that has a rundown park, bad status among the locals, not making any money, maintenance nightmare, on an expensive piece of land that doesn't even have a parking lot. So now you're gonna have to build a parking lot or buy more land. It was like almost like it was like a no-brainer to close it, even if the park, even if the whole company was in shambles.
Six Flags was just hurting so bad. Like it was, they were in the worst fiscal year situation imaginable.
I mean, in 2003, when they started kind of deciding on this whole situation, the chain was still $122 million in debt chain-wide. I mean, it's insane. That's after years of trying to recoup costs. That's after a couple of parks already, being sold, on the sales block. Crazy part. Yeah. And then one more question for you is, do you think we'll ever see another major regional park in Houston?
My instinct is yes, but I don't know if my heart says yes. My heart says yes, but I don't know if the regional park model works anymore in the United States.
No.
The fact is that we don't have a middle class the way China does anymore. And and to me, this is where the Mattel adventure parks are kind of, I fear a little doomed for failure.
I fear them too, yeah.
I think that this is sad, and this is a conversation for politics beyond this. But the fact is, the America of the 1970s, late 60s and 70s, was a rapidly increasing middle class of people with disposable income. And the 70s had its own issues, but that reality was still consistent, right? You had growing families of baby boomer kids with more disposable income and need to entertain those baby boomers. You know what I mean? And I just don't think that in the current economic climate that even $50 for a ticket to a regional park is as good of a value as it used to be for people. And if you were to build one from the ground up, you couldn't charge $50. You know what I mean? Like Cedar Fair or Six Flags can charge $60 for Kings Island because that's paid off. You know what I mean? Like they can do that. But we're talking about going into like $500,000 of debt to build a park. You're not going to be able to charge $50 for an admissions ticket. And I just don't think that the average middle class person is going to pay more than that for a non-Disney or Universal park. And hell, even paying for the $100, $200 for Disney is like becoming more of a question, you know? So,
and for an investment group, I think that this market, generally speaking, is so volatile. And if you look at the history of the theme park industry, I mean, we can talk about like, how does Six Flags not see this coming? It's because, well, the whole regional park idea is from the 70s, 80s. So by the time Six Flags or Premier Parks decided to do all these acquisitions, maybe they were just dumb and they didn't see history yet because there was no history yet. But now there's so much history. And there's so much in the regional theme park world where we've seen it gone wrong that I think even as an investment group, you know, the risk is too high unless you're really, really sure of what you're doing or you're going to use it as an asset and sell it off. You know, like, I don't know. I think you're right, Ian. I mean, I think with the lack of middle class, I don't understand. Yeah, I don't think people are going to build one anytime soon.
I think the regional park, I don't want to say the regional park is dead, but I would say that the reason you couldn't just like you said, Ian, like you couldn't just crank out a Kings Island park in a place like Houston randomly. What regional parks have that they need to exist is momentum and foundation and existing through and being born of the golden era of regional parks. Being what every regional park has that it needs to succeed is that it opened between 1961 and 1981, and that's it. And you can't just decide to conjure up. You can't conjure up an AstroWorld out of thin air. You can't conjure up a Kings Island or an Opryland or like they don't just happen now. Parks of major substance that like happen are assisted by some other thing typically. Like Lost Island in Iowa is as close as we've gotten to a regional park that just materialized out of thin air and hit the ground running. They've got 4 coasters,
how's that going?
A log flume, and a dark ride. They are supplemented heavily by a well-established water park and like an extremely captive audience, Waterloo, Iowa, which by some miracle has a lot of disposable income. The park is just a component of this larger resort complex area with a huge water park and hotels and a casino. And like, there's money. There's money happening in and around. And Lost Island was still a huge risk. And it's a risk that like hasn't paid off yet. And it has a great potential, but like it could still be a disaster. And we still don't know yet. Other regional park things that are happening are kind of happening more organically. It's stuff like family fun centers taking gradual steps into having more rides and more roller coasters or attractions that were just doing something else entirely that decided to build roller coasters. Stuff like Dollywood, I think is a great example. It went from being an attraction that wasn't about rides in any great measure and has become like the regional park like superstar, the American dream of regional parks for a park that never set out to do what it's doing, and then for it to be doing it now is like uncanny. So I think we're going to see more things like that. It's not going to be these regional parks being pumped out by the people designing regional parks from the ground up. It's people that are in the business of doing something else entirely different, like Codaland, which hopefully, please God, like let Codaland be a success, because that's a great example of a regional park that is being supported by an existing entity and developers, and the money is already there. And it has the potential to be great, or it has the potential to be a disaster. And like, we don't know what it will be yet.
Yeah. The only exception to that rule is Fiesta Texas opening as late as it did.
Yes, that's true.
But I will also make the note that again, was part of the San Antonio tourism infrastructure was in place and was heavily funded by USAA, who is headquartered in San Antonio. You know what I mean? Like, they literally went to the Opryland group and were like, we want to build a theme park. And Gaylord was like, we know how to do that. And so
yeah.
I would say it would take, and they also had to close them. I would say it takes a very specific, like a Houstonian business to actually build it. You know what I mean? It needs to be like we're not going to make a profit on this for the first 5 years type thing.
Beyonce, are you listening?
Beyonce.
Beehive World.
Beyonce,
save us. I have plans. Listen, I have plans. Let's go. I have dreams. I have a theme park layout ready to go for Houston. I'm ready to go. But I do think that it would take something like that to make it happen. It would take a corporation or an individual. And which a lot of these regional parks needed that. You know what I mean? Like a lot of them were started by one charismatic individual. They didn't end up keeping the parks opening, but you need someone who's like a well-connected businessman who has a lot of money, or a corporation that like wants to do this to the city. You know what I mean? For the city. And so I think that's what it's going to take. I don't know if that exists in this day and age anymore. The cynical part of me says no, because everything is through venture and investments. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. But that's the only possible like direction I could see happening for Houston, which again is a shame, because I think it could work. It's just, it really would require a shit ton of capital, and it would not see profitability right away. It would take time for that to kind of come through.
It would need people who just want an asset for Houston, and wanting an asset for your city is just such an outdated and bygone thing.
No, it is. I mean, it would need to be like an Efteling. Can we get an Efteling for Houston? The people of Houston
can we get a non-profit park?
A foundation? Yeah. Anyway,
or can we just get Houston to subsidize the hell out of a theme park and just like keep it running for the locals? I mean, 8 million people in your metro is as many as Paris. Even though the city is 8 times the biggest Paris, because it's all wasteland and parking lots, there's room for a theme park somewhere, clearly. Because if you have room for a million parking lots, you got room for theme parks.
Absolutely.
And then I want to actually ask one question, and just like what was the biggest mistake you think that the company made managing AstroWorld, Six Flags, like the last company?
I would say, I really think Ian hit it on the head with just like general upkeep stuff, and like keeping your buildings in a like maintaining everything to a degree so that it doesn't need very expensive fixes later when the money is not there. So aside from just general upkeep that was not being done because of the short-sightedness of various hands in the Six Flags company, I wish that there had been a better rhythm for AstroWorld for investments, of instead of constantly giving AstroWorld rides that had already seen 10 years or 5 years or 15 years of use, having all of these rides reach their end of their service life at the same time when the park was already in danger was the kiss of death. And it may have been less of a challenge for them to see a future with the park if for every ride they had that was reaching the end of its service life, they had a similar ride that was still had some decent life in it. But going 15 years without a major roller coaster that was new to the park, or major investments that were sturdy and brand new and had 30 years or 40 years of service ahead of it, I think was like they were setting themselves up for disaster.
I think I actually agree with that.
I would agree with that.
Well,
completely.
Thanks, guys.
I was gonna say the one thing I was at is if we have to pinpoint a specific thing that was the biggest mistake, it's the ride rotation program. AstroWorld was the and in my opinion, was the victim of the ride rotation program, because that's the reason they got so many of those weird additions towards the end. But it's also, and it kind of to your point, Alex, it affected the quality of attractions and the integration of those attractions into the park. You know what I mean? So the infrastructure wouldn't be updated because you weren't building something forever, you know? Like Accelerate was tense because it wasn't planned forever, you know?
Yeah, it wasn't supposed to be forever.
It's not supposed to be forever. And the more you do that to your park, Ultra Twister, like not really, probably, I don't know if it was built to be permanent, but I've seen pictures of that station. That didn't look very permanent. Like,
yeah,
you
a
know,
lot of
they
their stuff,
weren't.
it either didn't have permanent infrastructure because it was going to be sent to another park, or because it came from another park and already had 15 years under its belt and it wasn't going to be around for that long.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually.
Time Warner building Batman the Escape instead of in ground up was kind of the kiss of death. Like if they had come in with new ownership and built a brand new, didn't have to be a Batman the Ride. It could have been something completely different. You know what I mean? They could, I don't know what else they would have built at that time period, but like relocating the stand up, but then spending the money on the theming for it just seems like they had gotten the order of things reversed, if that makes sense. Like they
felt like they got a memo that was left behind by previous management that said, you know, don't put too much stake into this property.
Right.
See it for what it is, not for what it can be.
Right.
So that you don't, lose money. God forbid you accidentally put a good investment in this park.
Right.
Well, you know it's bad when even the premier park, Six Flags, didn't put money in your park.
No,
you know?
Like they didn't. They could have used a floorless. I'm just saying, like, you know, imagine if Dominator had been if Dominator had been built in Six Flags over, I think that could have really turned around the park. Like if they had gotten like a floorless, the record-breaking B&M floorless, like that would have been such a cool investment for that park.
I have this sneaking suspicion that Premier Parks built Serial Thriller expecting it to be like to turn things around, and like it was finally throwing the park a bone, but the damage was already so bad. It was already, the reputation was already done. And
at the same time, of course, we don't know what the books look like at Vekoma, but that also have a suspicion that maybe they just bought a ton of SLCs, almost like Oprah Winfrey style, just like threw them at parks and just SLC. Like it wasn't like an AstroWorld investment; it was like a general investment. And AstroWorld just happened to get a piece of it. You know what I'm saying?
But it was like AstroWorld did finally get something that was new and sturdy, and I feel like it just did not. I don't think it brought the payoff that they expected, because man, it didn't. The fact that there were a lot of bad decisions made, but even AstroWorld was not attractive enough of a bad decision for them to put Six Flags America or Six Flags Worlds of Adventure level over speculation investments in. You look back at the stuff that they were doing in some of these parks and building coasters year after year after year, Six Flags America, I think, being the best example. They still did not see, AstroWorld was not an attractive prospect for them to be like, oh yeah, let's build 4 major coasters in 3 years. AstroWorld, it was like, they already had their mind made up about AstroWorld, that they were the most conservative of any park in the Premier Parks lineup. That like, they treated that park the way they probably should have been treating every park in the chain.
Yeah,
they were so
100%.
conservative and so safe and so sparse with AstroWorld compared to what they were doing with other parks, because I feel like they already knew that there was not going to be a future with that park. They had already decided that like everything was a short-term decision with AstroWorld. Otherwise, they would have gotten all sorts of crazy shit too, like Six Flags America. You know, they would have been like, "Oh yeah, this park has got legs. It's got a future."
Which is wild when it is it's like a fleshed out actual regional park, like a design wise, and it got the shaft compared to like Six Flags America, which is like a wildlife park that's been like added onto, or Darien Lake even. Darien Lake got an Intamin hypercoaster, even though it was like an overgrown water park. You know what I mean? Like it's just bizarre.
Yeah, it's a campsite with roller coasters, but AstroWorld could only be justified for an SLC.
Yeah.
No, you guys are right on that. That is very sad, because AstroWorld really was probably one of the nicest parks in the whole country when it opened. Like it was it was honestly kind of a really stellar product, and the way that like the bones are really good. I love saying that, but this park's bones were really good. Like there
for
was
the 70s
like,
and the first half of the 80s, AstroWorld kicked ass. Like they were kings. Like they tore it up. Doing some of the stuff that they were doing. They did crazy stuff that worked. It was so awesome. Like the Rapids ride. I will forever be mystified by the fact that the park that gave us the Rapids ride, one of the most quintessential and ubiquitous theme park experiences in the world, is gone. Like the Rapids ride is gone because the park that somehow gave us the Rapids ride could not exist for another 30 years.
And so to finish the episode, I think maybe a little bit of a lighter note. I kind of like doing these park closure episodes with a section where we kind of discuss like how listeners may have actually ridden an AstroWorld attraction or have experienced a piece of AstroWorld. So we're all going to just run through some of the rides that AstroWorld had, some of which have been relocated and actually reopened, or parts of it have reopened somewhere else, or attractions that were, of course, relocated to AstroWorld, which they were very good at. So you may have actually ridden it in a previous spot. And I'm going to start off with the Accelerate trains. Of course, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of this is a kind of repetition from earlier, but it's two-part episode at this point, maybe. The Accelerate trains, of course, went to Secret Magic Mountain and are used on Ninja. Again, most is a part donor, but after the incident 2014 is the reason that the ride is still running. Still can run if they wish to ever do that with 3 trains. The Mayan Mindbender is still operating at Wonderland Amusement Park in Amarillo, and it's now with the Hornet as an outdoor coaster. And the Serial Thriller is now Edna Latac and La Ronde in Montreal. So those are still attractions you can kind of experience still.
Hook's Lagoon, which was the side complex from Waterworld, was relocated to La Ronde as well. As we mentioned earlier, the Bamboo Chutes, the unique custom boats they created for the Bamboo Chute, which, by the way, is one of the best like log flume names of all time, by the way. Just love that log flume name. Were relocated to the Aeroflume at La Ronde La Pitonne, which, of course, was dismantled in 2016, but you may have experienced that. And then, of course, the Texas Tornado was moved to Six Flags Discovery Kingdom at Zonga, where I definitely saw it built, but not running when I was a kid.
You and lots of other people too, but you may have ridden it in Mexico. You
may have even seen the pieces of Great America's Great Lightning sitting in Discovery Kingdom as a holding spot.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yeah, at one point, that park had 2 Schwarzkopfs in pieces.
Just hanging out in the parking lot, yeah.
But yeah, so if you've been to Silverwood and you've ridden their train, the passenger vehicles from the train at Silverwood are still running to this day. And then, of course, that steam locomotive that started at Magic Mountain that ran at Fiesta Tech or at AstroWorld for many years, you can still ride that in California. Where did we say that got? I know that's at the very beginning of the notes, but I just want to say the name of the place again where you can ride it. Hold on. It is the 610 Limited, the Pacific Coast Railroad in Santa Margarita Ranch. So a little AstroWorld piece there. Of course, if you go to, like we said, the Mayan Mindbender at Wonderland in Amarillo, they have the Gunslinger Yo-Yo from AstroWorld still there as well. If you ride Shockwave, or no, not Shockwave. If you ride Silver Bullet at Frontier City, there's bits and pieces of Grease Lightning and Viper, I think, in that one. I think also Shockwave's trains at Six Flags Over Texas were supplemented by these rides. Also at Six Flags Over Texas, I don't know if either of these rides are still operating at Six Flags Over Texas, but the Scrambler and the Huss Troika from AstroWorld went to Six Flags Over Texas. I know the Troika was built and then it was renamed, and then it had a Harley Quinn theme, and then it went away. I don't exactly know what the current status is on their Troika. I think they still have it and it's still in pieces, and they could probably rebuild it if they wanted. But I think the Scrambler is still open. They famously, fun fact, they had a Scrambler. It went to Magic Mountain. They sent it to Magic Mountain at one point because Magic Mountain's got damaged, but Magic Mountain wanted to keep theirs. So for whatever reason, Six Flags Over Texas lost theirs, and then AstroWorld gave them a new one, an old new one back.
And now Magic's is done too.
Magic's is gone. And then there's there's a slew of rides that you may have ridden before they went to AstroWorld.
Yeah, for the listeners on here that are actually old enough for this to be a possibility. Ultra Twister, of course, so Six Flags Great Adventure, then went to Six Flags AstroWorld. And the reason that it wasn't a shit Togo in the United States, by the way, is because it was actually manufactured in Japan and then was shipped over. So Togo International, that did all of the mistakes in America, including the Windjammer coasters at Knott's Berry Farm, they weren't actually manufacturer of that. There was actually a different company. So that's why Ultra Twister was actually good and good enough to be relocated to AstroWorld. Of course, Shockwave from Six Flags Magic Mountain went to Six Flags Great Adventure, and then was Batman the Escape at Six Flags AstroWorld.
It's crazy they got 2 Great Adventure coasters in a row. It was like
they did.
The Great Adventure to AstroWorld pipeline ran very deep.
Not as deep as the pipeline to Laurent, though.
You may have ridden, if you grew up in St. Louis in the 80s, you probably rode the Jetstream at Six Flags St. Louis before it was sent to AstroWorld and operated as Viper. And if you were if you were lucky enough to have visited the 1984 World's Fair in New Orleans, you rode Tidal Wave in its original location. One
thing I'm really taking away from this situation here is that, like, I know why Laurent gets all these rights, because Laurent has like a commitment to a certain amount of investments or whatever, if I'm not mistaken, with the local government. But to me, it's almost like an AstroWorld 2.0, because they're getting all the old stuff, you know? Some stuff doesn't even get built, like freaking Magic Mountain's Green Lantern and whatnot.
Government obligation for a certain amount of infrastructural investments, it would still be open. So...
True.
God,
true.
You can say what you want about Laurent, but Montreal has their priorities in order. They're like, our park
that could have been the answer.
They know what they're doing. Yes. Very true.
I mean, now I feel like that's the perfect ending of this episode. Like, that could have been the answer all along. If, like, the ride rotation program was just them committing to keeping the park alive and the local government keeping the park, you know, that could have been a whole thing. Damn, Laurent actually kind of got it good. Everyone listening, if you go to Laurent frequently, be careful what you wish for. You could have been the AstroWorld side of things.
Yeah.
Aesthetically, they actually do have a tie-in, too. They're both the late 60s style. They're totally like, they have a similar story. Anyways, sorry.
And they both had those Arrow Junior mine trains. They both had Intamin. They had identical Intamin stand-up loopers.
It's wild. Anyways.
And
Secret Sister parts.
I feel like that kind of sums up the whole AstroWorld saga 20 years after its closure. Do you gentlemen have anything to add to this?
2.5 hours.
That's why this is probably going to be 2 episodes. If you're listening to this, it could be either way. I haven't decided yet. But if anything, thank you for listening, you know.
Yeah.
And is there anything else you guys want to add?
I think I've said enough. I'm good.
I've said enough. If Beyonce is listening... Let us know. We will develop the park for you. We'll develop the Houston park for you. We have lots of ideas.
Yes. Lots of ideas. And for everyone listening, if you have enjoyed this deep dive into AstroWorld, please leave us preferably 5-star reviews on on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. We'd appreciate that. Make sure that if this is a 2-part episode, you've listened to both parts of it. And of course, our Jaga Lake episode we have remastered.
We're really shooting from the hip. We're like, how many episodes is this? Is this 1? Is it 2? We don't know.
I need to go back and investigate what the options are.
You know the answer right now. We don't know the answer yet.
I know. You're living in the future, my listener. And with that, guys, we're gonna wrap things up. We'll see you guys in an episode of Coast to Kings Radio soon. Thank you for listening, and bye.
Bye.
Bye.